Matt Martin here. Sitting in with me is Paul Bean, and we are broadcasting from the Thacker Jewelry Studios. Custom jewelry, engagement rings, and more at thackerjewelry.com. And we've got Harvey Kronberg on line one. Harvey, how's it going?
It's a pleasure. I'm doing well.
And you're the producer over at Quroum Report, correct?
Owner, publisher, and
janitor.
Occasional columnist.
Oh, I'm sorry, publisher. You've got it all set up there, then, huh?
Once upon a time, it was a one-man operation.
Yeah.
Glad to have Scott on board, though.
Yeah. Well, thank you for calling in, Harvey. Now, we've got a lot to talk about. A lot's going on down there in Austin, but here in Lubbock, all the city mayors, or most of the big city mayors of Texas, signed a letter to Dustin Burrows, or Representative Burrows, there in the Capitol, who's the head of the Ways and Means Committee, and they did it against this 2.5% cap. Can you tell us kind of what's going on there?
Oh, absolutely. Well, first of all, the 2.5% cap, many people think is actually going to lower their property taxes or contain their property taxes. But Mayor Adler in Austin was one of the signatories. We have over 100 people a day coming to Austin. Housing is having a difficult time catching up, and so the appraisals on houses are having more to do with driving property taxes up than the tax rate.
Hey, so, I've lived there. I understand. I'll tell you, we bought a house there, and I don't know this kind of off the subject a little bit, but we bought a house there for I think $175,000. Sold it for $242 4 years later.
Yeah,
when we
moved. The rate is only accelerating.
Yeah.
People in Central City may see 20-25% increase in their appraisal. So even if you kept the same rate, their property taxes would still be skyrocketing. So it's it could be a solution or a part of a solution, but it really is. Nobody's going to see their property taxes go down.
One of the things that is driving the tax appraisals in Austin is building costs are playing a factor in that, but land costs are what's driving a lot of the appraisal values in Austin. I built homes there for 4 years, especially out in Barton Creek along Navidad Drive in those areas, and I saw vacant lots out in Barton Creek go from $125,000 to $450,000 in a matter of a couple of years. I mean, it's just incredible how the land cost has skyrocketed.
So that's one piece of the puzzle the mayors are confronting. The second is at the end of every legislative session, the Texas Association of Counties and the Texas Municipal League, which represent the cities, get together to figure out what new responsibilities the legislature has just off-shifted to them. We're not very good at doing many things, but one of the things we're doing is that we are good at is telling the cities and counties they have to do additional things, but not funding that. So part of the increase in the expense of cities is legislatively driven. And while it's, the best example is 30 years ago, the state was paying for 50% of education, and property taxpayers were paying for the other 50%. Now the state's paying about 35% of education, and local property taxpayers are paying 65%. People, it's very appealing to do the 2.5%, but what folks don't remember is that property taxes fund everything from your local emergency rooms, and certainly in rural Texas, hospitals are absolutely critical. You have major storms, potholes have to be repaired, lots of unintended things. Unanticipated things happen. So
now Harvey,
that's what's driving it.
I mean, I understand what you're saying, and 2.5%, I just don't see it staying there. But don't you think that number one is a cap on the amount they can charge taxes? I mean, I personally would see that as a better thing than them rolling back taxes, because we're looking at a long-term solution instead of a short-term solution to put money in my pocket. But number two, don't you think that a lot of these large municipalities are taking advantage of the people that they're taking the taxes from?
Arguably, it's indisputable that taxes are going up at a increasing velocity. But the only thing I would add to that equation, I don't know about capping per se, but one of the interesting things here in Austin, for instance, is we've got now this massive explosion of high-rises. The city tries to, or the appraisal district tries to appraise them, and these guys have banks of lawyers to go protest the appraisal, and the city has, or the county has, 3, maybe 5 lawyers, and these things go on for years on the appraisals. And typically, the commercial properties and the multifamily properties will win. And inevitably, I'm not going to say it's not justified, but that does require some cost shifting back down to innocent bystanders and residents.
But I'm sorry. Go ahead. I didn't.
Well, the only thing I was going to say is that city Colorado, for instance, tried something where taxes could only go up to match the rate of inflation and population growth, and they ended up strangling themselves, because what inevitably happens is that your population increases, and you either have to build out the infrastructure before the population gets there, or you're playing catch up to build the infrastructure afterwards.
But isn't that where the voters come in? I mean, if the mayors can make a good point, or the city council, the voters can come in and say, okay, well, we agree with you. Let's get it done.
Absolutely. The only issue is that the municipalities and counties don't really have an advertising budget for each election, and I guarantee you that realtors and land developers, et cetera, will have it, and so it becomes an unequal battle of messaging. And I'm not taking a position on this. I'm just trying to explain why the mayors feel so threatened, especially in these fast growth cities.
And Harvey, I completely understand.
But when you get the allowable increase without a voter input at 8%, that's like 3.5 times annual inflation. And when you have a growing population, you also have a growing tax base. You have a growing sales tax base. You have other tax income. As an example, right now, when I left the Lubbock City Council in 2012, I think the current income now for the city of Lubbock is close to $300 million more annually than when I left, because of the expanding tax base. And that's happening all over the state of Texas.
Right, man. It's just a matter of catch up, and again, what the state is additional requirements the state is imposing on the cities and the counties. There is a state representative out of Fort Worth named Charlie Guerin, who has just recently gotten out of committee, allowing municipalities to buy down property taxes by increasing their local sales taxes. If that is necessary, and that would require, I do believe, it would require a popular vote.
So that's already occurred here in Lubbock years ago.
So Harvey, Harvey, let's go ahead and move over to the Regents, because we're running out of time, and I have a couple questions.
Sure.
The governor, he pointed 3 new regents to I say 3 new. It's 2 new regents and 1 that used to be a regent to Texas Tech. Is that precedented? Is that something that's normal?
Yes, it is normal. He has 2 days later, he appointed 4 to the University of Texas Board of Regents.
Okay.
And typically there's X number of vacancies or terms expiring, and they will typically not announce them one at a time, but announce them all together. And typically when they go through a confirmation process, they appear before the nominations committee in the Senate simultaneously.
So the governor,
this one's got to. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
I was going to say the governor's going to get very angry at me for asking this question. But are we still seeing a big pay-to-play kind of thing with the Regents?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Let's not be naive.
I already knew the answer to that. I was just going to ask just to get it out there, Harvey.
I had a wealthy developer friend of mine ask me a couple of years ago what the ticket was to even be considered for the UT Board of Regents. And I told him the 6-figure threshold that is conventional wisdom now. Yeah, I'm sure there are exceptions, but not many.
Yeah. So there's one other thing that really, really caught my attention that you sent me, and that was that the Senate bill originally intended to be a clean bill preventing cities from mandating small business to do paid sick leave, came out with a bunch of stuff businesses don't want. Tell us a little bit about that, because this was a bill that kind of made sense at the time, But the way that you wrote this, it almost sounds like it's going the direction of the bathroom bill.
Exactly. Before we leave that, I just want to make one quick observation about your Regents, and that is Mark Griffin is one of the nominees, and I apologize for the dogs in the background.
Okay.
But Mark Griffin was originally a Rick Perry appointee. He was asked to resign after introducing Kay Bailey Hutchison when Hutchison was either thinking or challenging Rick Perry for the gubernatorial primary. And so he was essentially fired by Rick Perry and now rehired by Greg Abbott.
That's what you get when you support the I guess the enemy, if you want to call it that.
Exactly. Well, political campaigns, no slight is insignificant.
That's right.
And anyway, I don't think he particularly endorsed her. He just introduced her. Is the story that I hear. Now on the bathroom, I mean not on the bathroom bill, but on the bill
Small
to
business
prevent local ordinances from micromanaging. Essentially, in this case, it was employee sick leave.
Right.
The city of Austin and a couple of other cities have said that businesses and small businesses have to pay for, I think it's 8 days of employee sick leave. This was happening during the flu, essentially epidemic last year.
Yeah.
And the legislature, with strong business backing, wanted to codify that and not have the state intrude into small businesses with this unanticipated cost, just like with local government. The bill was broadly supported. It was opposed by the cities. Because we're doing a lot of exemptions of city council's decisions. But the bill, as it came out, included language that was much broader and almost seems to allow discrimination in hiring against gays and lesbians or people for whom there may be some religious objection. But it also went so far by some standards as to say that city councils couldn't require that construction companies have to provide water breaks for their workers in the middle of the summer. And it became its own micromanagement bill.
Yeah.
And became, in some ways, the very thing that it was trying to prevent.
Well,
When you're in a city like Houston or Dallas or Austin, giving people the option to discriminate in employment at that level becomes problematic, and business has very quietly organized to oppose it because we have higher demand in labor and not a shrinking workforce, but it can't keep with demand.
Yeah. All right. Well, Harvey, we're running out of time. I just want to thank you for coming on. You are, the publisher, and you said also owner of the Quroum Report. Thank you so much for coming on. QuorumReport.com. Is there anything real quick you want to highlight?
One of the most interesting things is the new school finance plan argument, and that is the House came out with one of the most nuanced and positive plans I've seen in my 30 years. The Senate is probably not even going to come out with a plan. They're just going to do the teacher pay raise, which is a much better political bumper sticker.
It sounds better, right?
Doesn't really solve any long-term problems.
Yeah.
So
Check
keep your eyes on that. We'll find out in the next week or so.
Check it all out on the QuorumReport.com. Thank you, Harvey.
My pleasure.
All right, you have a good day.